Baby, CreepTime the podcast is going on tour and coming to a city near you.
So head over to creeptime.com to get your tickets to come see CreepTime live.
Well, you can't trust County.
Well, welcome back.
Well, welcome back.
How you doing?
Oh, well, I mean, we're recording this the day after the election results have come in, so
We are. And
there's that.
It's an overwhelming day. And I know people don't come here for this, so I don't want to
Totally.
get too far into anything. But I just want to reiterate on behalf of both of us that I'm grateful that we can create this kind of escapism for people to
1000%.
hide away into at least once a week for an hour to come hang with us, spend some time with us, and just take their minds off the world around them and maybe into something else and concentrate on that for just an hour. That feels good. It feels good for me. I don't know how it feels for you.
Oh my God. Well, I was telling you, I was like, I'm so happy that I get to talk to you today and just laugh. Like I knew that I had something to like look forward to just in terms of raising my spirits a little bit. Although it is kind of funny not doing the reveals and then you being some harrowing
reveal.
character.
This is the harrowing character you're looking at. Me
Not
the
at
morning
all.
after
People
the
are gonna
election.
be like, yowza.
This is the harrowing character. Jeez.
Oh,
But
God. I know.
We're here.
We're here.
So
And we're doing the thing.
we have something to do. Let's discuss it. Welcome back, everybody, to CreepTime the podcast. I do have some notes, and I have a lot of stuff to do today.
Oh, okay.
Whew. Well, first off, thank you for being with us after the Halloween shows. That was so fun. Oh, also, I think this is going to be edited, so we won't cuss, or will we cuss?
Oh.
Are we cussing?
I guess we can. Maybe we can see how well we do today.
I'm going to try not to.
I'm going to try not to
cuss.
too.
I'm in rare form, but I'm going to try not to cuss.
My mouth needs to be cleansed.
Get that bar of soap out, baby. But yes,
exactly.
After the Halloween shows, you probably saw that we had a lot of week-over-week reveals, and we were doing video podcasts. Specifically for just October, we are back here in November. And we thought that it was such a success that we would continue to do video podcasts for now to see how you guys like it, how you guys feel about it. If you are listening on Apple, you may not have access to this because they don't support video just yet. So if you do want to watch, or if you just want to listen, that's fine. But if you do want to watch, come over to Spotify. You can watch us there, or you can watch us right at CreepTime the podcast on YouTube. And that is QVC for you right there.
And that is QVC.
And that-
I just saw that we got tagged in something on Instagram. Some creeper
I'm
packing
scared.
up.
What?
No. Good thing. Packing up, I guess, her apartment, and she had us cast onto the TV. And I always do that with my podcast. I'll go on YouTube and I'll cast it to the TV, which is so sweet.
I do that too. That's funny. Yeah, I do that too. But it's mostly for video podcasts that I do that for. That's fun. Maybe that's what we are now. We'll be on somebody's TV.
Exactly. It'll feel like we're in your house, except maybe this episode will look a little bit more comforting.
I don't know. I felt very comforting as Reagan. I really did.
I don't think I'll ever forget just my eyes clocking you for the first time.
The visceral experience of the visual overload. I mean, just the same for you. I was shocked by what I saw. I did not expect a costume of that caliber.
Oh
on that
my
day.
God. No, I mean, I truly could not believe how much you looked like Reagan. Like you looked just like her.
I think it really must have been a thing. That's what I was getting at with Rinna. I think it must have been a thing like Rinna where I was like, maybe there are just parts of me, the canvas, that just kind of already looked close enough. So it was just a little bit of tweaking with makeup. Like a little bit.
You got an incredible canvas. There's a lot to work with there.
It's a lot of real estate going on here. But welcome back, like I said, to everybody. Again, we are back for another Friday episode. And if you have not been listening, you may not know that we are going in the succession of the tour dates because we have a tour coming up in 2025. Tickets are available on creeptime.com. But we started with LA because that's the first city that we're playing. So we did a case from LA. Then we moved up to Sacramento, Portland, Seattle. We just did Salt Lake. So we are now at Denver. So I chose a Denver case. Well, one that is, it's not Denver proper. It's a bit of a ways outside of Denver, but it's close enough and it's also very mysterious. So I wanted to bring it to you. This is kind of a disappearance case, actually.
Ooh.
It's twofold, but the crux of it is a real mysterious disappearance.
In my head, I was like, it's going to be the case of us almost flying off the Rocky Mountains.
It does take place in the Rockies. I will say that.
Oh, really? Okay.
I should have led with that. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Denver has a special place in both of our hearts.
I loved it. Denver was great.
I
Although,
love Denver.
for any people who live in Colorado who were listening, Montrose was so lovely.
We have to go back. Those
We
hot
do.
springs. Oh
The
my
hot
God.
springs. I just loved everything about it. I loved even walking through the town and like the quaint
Yes.
like vibes there. Just
Yeah.
stopping in little cafes.
It felt like a little European town, I remember us saying.
We were the city girls. We were the city
We were the
girls in
city
Montrose.
gals. Yeah. They were like, who are these
Can
kids?
we get a hot chocolate? And they were like, this is a bar.
Yeah. They were like, you're getting an IPA.
Yeah. So the case that I have for you today, the name that I want to surface is Keith Reinhard. Do you know that name by any chance? Because I did not.
It sounds familiar, but it's not hitting me as any sort of like true crime case.
I think it's a little more niche, to be honest. I'd never
Okay.
heard of it before, but maybe this was one of the ones that got buried under like a mysterious disappearance, and there's very limited information, so maybe that's why
Okay.
it doesn't get covered all too often, but it is specific to the Colorado and somewhat close to the Denver area. I think statewide, maybe the name is pretty familiar to people, but Colorado creepers, let us know.
Mm.
So this is our top line. If I could set the scene, do I want to send you pictures now? I will. I'm going to send you pictures right
Okay.
now. Let me add them to the chat.
You know, I love those visuals.
Baby, I need something to my eye on at all times.
I need something to stare at. If it's not going to be Reagan.
I'm sorry. I wish I was enough. So, did you get that? Did you open it?
I got it. It's
Okay, so
open.
just stick to the first page, I would say. But
Okay.
you're probably going to see Keith on the first page. I haven't looked at it since I did the research
Yeah.
last week. Now, if I could set the scene, this is September 7th, 1987. It is actually a date that is going to predate the disappearance of Keith, who is the focal point of this story. So on that September day, in this very small and quaint little Colorado village called Silver Plume, where at the time there was a population of maybe like 200, 250 people at max.
Oh my God.
Very, very small old mining town. We're going to focus in on a man named Tom Young, and you'll get to his pictures a little bit later, but for now, I'll have you sit where you're at.
Okay.
So he ran a bookshop in this little village town. It was right on Main Street, and he closed up shop for the night on that September 7th date. He was headed home. He had a dog with him that night, his dog Gus. He was going to be gone for the night. But Tom never made it home from Main Street. Somehow, he just seemed to vanish on that night without any trace or any explanation at the time. So if we fast forward from that date to just about 9 months after the fact, there is an eerie disappearance that would take place after another man moved into town and occupied the same bookshop as the new shop owner. This was Keith Reinhard. And almost a year to the date, he would disappear.
Whoa.
It was like a month between their disappearances, or like a month between the full year mark of their disappearances. So Tom had gone missing, right? And his shop, to give you some like backfill here, his shop was closed down. It was totally emptied. And when it was reopened by the new business owner, Keith Reinhard, he opened it as an antique shop. So like I said, less than that year after Tom went missing, it was August 7th, 1988, when Keith closed up the shop for the evening. And then we know that somewhere within a 2-hour window, he seemed to vanish without a trace that night. So the story shocked locals for obvious reasons. And when the press began to sort of ripple outside of the county and it went through Colorado, people started to whisper about the shocking similarities between the two disappearances, because not only had both of them owned the same shop, but again, they had vanished almost 1 year apart from one another. And Keith had a very special connection to Tom. He was fascinated by Tom's disappearance. So today, we are going to unpack some of the backstory of this town and why some people believe that the city itself holds some very dark energy and it can drive people to madness, as some claim. And we're also going to cover the moment-by-moment account of what we know to have happened on the 7th, 1988, to explain where Keith really went, as he has never been found. Just let's pause there and just discuss
my
some of that
God.
top line of the
How
strangeness.
spooky.
Isn't it? Isn't it weird?
Yeah, my first thought is I'm like, I'm thinking it's probably the same person that
Who
was
caused the
responsible
disappearance? That's
for
what I
both
thought
of their
too.
disappearances. And I'm like, what was their tie to that bookshop? Like, it seems so much tied to like the space and like the ownership of that space.
I shouldn't be like smiling or giddy for any reason, but because there's so much that I know about this story that's going to like blow this out of the water for you. I'm just like,
this feels very Nancy Drew. I'm like,
we're at the tip of the iceberg right now.
Okay. Wow, that is so bizarre.
Yeah, I think I had the same exact instinct too when I first heard the story. I was like, there's something with this location, with this bookshop, but I had a difficult time kind of thinking, I'm like, is it the Silver Plume mob in this town of 200 people? Like,
200 people, which is like a high school graduating class. I mean, that's
everybody
so
knows
small.
everybody. That's how so many people knew that this guy Keith had gone missing, because like it was part of the ritual at night once you close up your business, which also I'm like, how well can a business do? Like an antique shop in Silver Plume? Like how many people are really stopping through who haven't already seen your wares? It was confusing to me.
I wonder if it was outside of like a big tourist area, like maybe.
I mean, it was on Main Street, but people don't. I mean, from what I read, some people do stop here because it is scenic. It's beautiful. It's up in the Rockies. Like you're going to see a lot of mountainous areas, but it also sounded very rural and isolated. It sounded like not a lot of people kind of pass in and out, but I could be wrong about that. Any Silver Plume creepers, clock us.
Yeah.
They're out there.
They're like, all 200 of us. Here we are.
Could you imagine?
Oh my God.
We had an entire town under our belt. That'd be insane. I mean, from the numbers we've seen, New York is getting close.
Yeah.
Well, let's just dive in, but before we do, I'm just going to say a massive thank you to everybody who has stopped by to CreepTime. We are so happy to have you here, Creepers, for another episode. Yes. We are your hosts. Again, I am Silas. This is Stove.
This is Stove.
This is
Steve.
Stove.
Steve, Stove, Oven, all the above.
And if you guys are brand new, we come out with stories every single week on the show. So if you want to stick around, if you don't want to miss any, please subscribe, follow to the show. You can also hit the bell notification, because if you do, every time we drop a surprise episode, you are going to get an alert. And I feel like we don't plug this very often, but also if you want to unlock all of the hidden episodes, we have a whole horde of premium content.
Yes.
Which you can do for a 2-week trial for free on Apple if you want to listen, or you can get it right on Spotify. And I believe it's a Spotify exclusive, that it's ad-free for premium content.
Yes, and we got special guests on there. We've been doing like some pretty niche cases recently too. Like they kind of spread the gamut of like what we normally cover on CreepTime. There's some interesting stuff in the premium apps.
I agree. We take a lot of suggestions too, I think, for those. I think those are the ones where we really lean into like the creepers who comment on Reddit and they're like, oh, can you look into this case? I'm like, that would be good for premium.
Yes.
I know. We did one with, I don't know if you listened to it, the one with Scott and I recently.
No, I need to go back and listen to it because I know that there was some salacious content at the beginning.
He immediately launched into, I hope he listened to it, he immediately launched into how he wanted to start an erotic ASMR like career. And I was like, I have to run a case right now. Can we not?
I cannot. I love him.
But again, thank you everybody again for stopping by. We would also appreciate a positive review for the show. That really helps the show to grow and get the stories out to more people. And as we've mentioned many times before, of course, we are going on tour. So if you do want to get your tickets early, because in some cities they are selling very fast, please head over to creeptime.com. We cannot wait to see you there live and in person for CreepTime Live. But with that said, baby, I do have one other thing to discuss. It's Magic Mind.
Miss Magic Mind.
What are we discussing?
I'm like, what are we discussing?
No. Okay. This is very much needed today because I know there are a number of creepers who have gotten on the Magic Mind bandwagon and they've heard all of the things that we've said about it before because we love it. I am in a ritual now with them where I take them every day, sometimes multiple times a day, but that's my own issue. And they have upped the ante because thus far for October, we partnered with them for the whole month and they gave a 20% discount for anybody who wanted to get a single time purchase or a subscription. They have upped the ante yet again for November. I do not know how long this will last. They have not told us, but they are now offering CreepTime 40 as the code. And there is going to be a link in the description for this. 40% off your first order or your first subscription charge.
Let me tell you, it's worth it. That is a deal.
I know I'm drinking coffee right now, but again, it's the circumstances of the election.
Yes. Well, And if you can, I took a sleep shot last night before I went to bed, and I swear to God, it did help me sleep. Yeah, because I was feeling anxious for probably obvious reasons, and it helped me go right to bed.
I think I thought to do that, but then there were so many in my fridge, and some of them are in bags. I'm like, I can't sift through and look for a sleep shot right now.
Yeah. You know what I also forget to mention every time is that they're not habit forming, or they're non-habit forming, which I really love. Because especially when they sent me the sleep shots, I was like, oh no, am I going to get like so into
I thought the same thing.
And it was like non-habit forming. I was like, great. Perfect.
No, it's excellent flavor. They really do work. They really do put you in a flow state. I'm curious to see if they're ever going to come out with additional wellness shots that like do other things, because this is really an energy focus one. That's the core shot. And then the sleep shot is new. Be interesting to see like what they come out with in the future. But Creepers, they are excellent. We cannot rave about them enough. We're so excited that so many of you have already gotten Magic Mind to try it at home. From what I've seen, people love it. They absolutely I saw that love too. It.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Keep writing in and telling us how you like them, because we love them, but we want our listeners, anything that we talk about, we want y'all to love it just as much. So
yeah, because then we get to share in the experience with you and like hear how you're like starting your journey with it. But we also want you to get your discount. Like if you're going to try it, please use the discount. It will help you immensely. Get 40% off. Again, we don't know how long that's going to last, so take advantage. It is going to be in the description of this podcast, a link as well as your code CreepTime40. Again, single time purchase or a subscription. And with that, can we get into some backstory, Stu?
Yeah, I'm itching to hear more about this.
So, although this is technically, let's just start here and just say this is technically a double disappearance. For the sake of clarity, I am first going to primarily focus on Keith. This is really his story that we're discussing, but you can't discuss it without talking about Tom Young, because he is integral to the story and what brought Keith out to Silver Plume. So, who was Keith Reinhard? So you've got those pictures. Any just initial feelings that you're getting from looking at those photos before I go into a bit of his backstory?
He looks like an outdoorsy kind of guy. He looks like a woodsman almost, and kind of groovy.
I was like, what gave it away? The 3 pictures of him in the woods.
Maybe the lumberjack vibes, but he looks kind of groovy too. Like he looks like a pretty cool guy.
I thought that, doesn't he read his 70s? Like not in his 70s. He reads his very 70s.
He's reminding me of some actor, and I don't know who it is, but it could even be like Clint Eastwood or something, like facially. But
I was thinking, oh God, what's the guy's name from? I know there's creepers that are going to be screaming about this. Christmas Vacation, Family Christmas Vacation.
Oh, Chevy Chase?
Yes, yeah, a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. I could see it with like a mustache and a beard, but like
yeah. If he had facial hair and a wig,
facial hair and like flowy, longer hair. He just seems kind of groovy.
I agree. It's strange that some of those pictures, I believe, were actually taken in the mid, if not late 80s. So it's a little bit of a time warp to look at it. But Keith himself was born September 10th, 1938, and the sources that I found listed his birthplace as Georgetown. So, of course, I immediately thought it was like, oh, DC. No. I believe it was Georgetown, Illinois. So he had always kind of lived out in the Midwest well before Colorado. And then I think he lived outside of Chicago for a period of time. Now, for reference, this is maybe like 2.5 to 3 hours outside of Chicago. I think if you're going straight south from where he was living for most of his life. And he was in Algonquin. If I pronounce that incorrect, do know that I attempted to search it up, and that's what I got. Algonquin, Illinois. That's about 40 some odd minutes outside of Chicago. So his birthplace, was 2.5 hours. Where he lives predominantly is 40 minutes.
Okay.
Keith was a writer as his full-time profession. He wrote for the Daily Herald sports section, which is that what Garrett is a part of, or is that something else?
He's part of the Chicago Tribune. So
okay,
but
gotcha.
He's not a writer. He is a designer. But
equally as needed, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in print media.
Precisely.
It's a dying art. You're like, okay.
I mean, this is a transferable skill. It's amazing.
Exactly.
But he wrote for the Daily Herald. He was in the sports section for 22 years. He was a writer there, and he had a particular passion for covering high school sports. He was very passionate about seeing young athletes kind of come up, which I thought was cool. But the timing of his disappearance was pretty specific, I would say, from what I was reading about. He was 49 at the time, so he was going to be approaching his 50th birthday on September 10th, right after the summer. So he was repeatedly kind of vocalizing these things to friends, to his family, his wife at the time of 3 years, that he was feeling very anxious about this birthday. I think you could probably say that this is something close to a midlife crisis, but he was nervous about what the new chapter would look like. And he just felt like he kind of had to overhaul his life. He had to do something kind of momentous. So what Keith did was he ended up taking a 90-day leave of absence from work from the Herald. And the hope was that he would have some downtime for reflection, some rest, and he would also prioritize a personal project, which he had had on the back burner for a long time, and he was hoping to see it come to fruition. He was a writer, of course, so he was interested in writing a novel, and he came across this strange story, which happened from about a year prior, out in Silver Plume, Colorado. It was the story of the shop owner, Tom Young, who had vanished from the town, and nobody had seen him, and Tom became the focal point of his fixation. He was obsessed over this story, and I don't know if it was because they were very similar in age. They were both approaching 50. Like, I think Tom was 47. I saw one report that said he was 63. That is patently untrue. He was 47 at the time that he disappeared. So the plan is that Keith is going to move out to Silver Plume during this leave of absence from work. It's about 70 miles west of Denver. So like I said, it's outside of Denver, but I wouldn't say it's close.
Yeah.
And he is going to investigate the story, boots on the ground in person, while he's taken the time to kind of rest and live in a very scenic location that's nowhere near any major city, right? Which, this doesn't sound like a foreign story to me. Just, you know what I mean? Like,
no,
it sounds familiar.
It's almost like, I know misery is obviously like a different thing, but like going out, a writer, like going out into like a cabin, almost like a writer's retreat feeling, it's familiar.
That's true. We do see that time and time again. They have to go somewhere for inspiration. It's kind of Salem's Lot, although that's him returning to like his hometown, really. But I'll keep pressing on. So that is the plan that we've got. He's going to go to Silver Plume. Silver Plume, which it's a park, or it's a part of Clearwater County. And it's, to give you like some history on the location, I think it peaked during the silver bloom in the night, like the early 19th century or late 19th century. But by the 80s, it was just kind of considered I mean, I guess it was a tourist attraction, but people didn't often stop there. It was just kind of looked at as a snapshot of like, this is an untouched mining town. Like, if you go there, this is exactly as it was decades and decades and decades ago. So the community, like I said, is small. They're very close-knit. The landscape is about 9,000 feet up elevation-wise into the Rocky Mountains. It's very rough, rugged terrain to kind of get there in most cases, and it is just covered in these beautiful, you might have some pictures on there. Maybe I included them, maybe not. I will add this to Reddit, but it's covered in hills of just these stunning trees. It's so pretty. It reminded me a lot of like the last time we were driving through Colorado.
Yeah. When I was little, we went into like a couple of mining towns, and this reminds me so much of like when we used to go out to like Salt Lake or like Breckenridge and stuff. We would stop into mining towns, and I know this whole vibe.
I get a similar sense for it too. It actually, I know this is very different, but whatever like little thing that we stopped out of outside of Vegas to go to that haunted bar.
Yes.
It was like
so
that.
Similar.
I was like, there's like 5 businesses total.
Yes.
And everybody there knows everybody there kind of vibe. But this is exactly what he wanted. Keith was like, I want beautiful, I want picturesque, I want serene, a natural environment. I want to hike, I want to mountain climb. He wanted to conquer his fear of heights, which I understand. And he also wanted to get in really great shape before his 50th birthday. So that was what the intention of the summer was. Writing, rest, get in shape, and kill your 50s. So all that said, that's the plan. Keith moves there temporarily with his wife of 3 years hanging back in the Chicago area, or Algonquin, I guess. And he opens this antique shop in town, which occupied, of course, the same exact shop that Tom ran his bookstore. And he did that intentionally because he was going to study him. The hope being that he could finish the novel there, the shop would be semi-successful. And if it was semi-successful, he would have his wife come out and move with him permanently. And they would just live in Silver Plume. Now, Keith's wife, Carolyn, I should clarify, again, only married for 3 years. It wasn't exactly clear like why she didn't initially come with him, but it probably just seemed like, of course, she's not going to quit her job. to come out with him if he's having what may seem like a temporary crisis where he's like, I have to move to rural Colorado and I have to get in shape and climb mountains. She'll be like,
and she might have been like, go do your thing.
Yeah, I'll be back in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, call me when this is all over.
Exactly. Yeah. I think she was just kind of playing the waiting game to be like, is this a phase?
Yeah.
Or is he serious about this? And I guess the determining factor would have been the success of the shop and if the novel was going to get picked up. So that was clear from what I read, all of that. The move was in solitude because there were some people that wrote that he had moved out with his wife. I'm going to also say that is, again, patently untrue. Not true. He moved out alone. That is specific. The friends who knew Keith, they described him as a free spirit. He was very kind, and he was always seeking a new adventure in life, which I do think kind of comes through from the photos. So I'm just going to pause there before we get into the moment-by-moment disappearance and just ask you, does that all of that kind of align? Do you get a sense from what you're seeing that is this person?
Yeah, I have a very clear picture of this whole scenario. I think what's kind of baffling to me is just the location seems so random. Like for him to just kind of like pick this on a map and go there, which adds to the unfortunate nature of how this is going to go, that he's still disappeared. He's still not found to this day. Like, oh, sorry.
there's a bug flying by me. Sorry.
Oh
no, but I was going to say that Tom was the reason. His fixation on Tom Young started all the way back when he was living near Chicago. So that was the whole reason he picked Silver Plume.
This guy.
I mean, it did make headlines, and it was it wasn't a solved disappearance. So it kind of had, circulated in like certain outlets, I guess, like over the year about a strange thing that happened in an old mining town. And for whatever reason, he just latched onto that story. I think he just saw maybe something of himself in Tom and in the setup of Tom. I don't know if it was their age or that Tom was a single man who was living alone in this town, even though Keith wasn't single. But that was the reason, to clarify, that he picked Silver Plume, picked this bookshop.
It's just so strange to have such a personal connection to that story and then for it to lead him to such an unfortunate fate. It's just bizarre.
Well, that's the big question. Was it in his hands or out of his hands?
Yeah.
Because some people disappear on their own. Some people are taken. Or some people have tragic accidents. We don't know. So that's probably a good time for us to shift into the moment by moment of what really happened in Silver Plume in 1988 leading up to Keith's disappearance. Now, before we get into the day that Keith actually went missing, there is something that needs to be discussed. About a week before Keith's disappearance, there is a shocking discovery that was made in this county, in Silver Plume. On the 31st of July, 1988, there were a couple of local hunters who were patrolling like mountain areas. They were looking for, I think, different wildlife, I believe. And approximately 1 hour into this walk, after they had left Silver Plume, they found the skeletal remains of a human being propped up against a tree. Not very far away from those remains was a backpack, a rusted pistol, and the skeletal remains of a dog. It was Tom Young and his dog Gus in those woods.
Oh my God.
And I'm going to brace you because shockingly, there are pictures of these remains. I did include a photo of Tom and the dog. I believe it's on page 3. If you want to look, you don't have to.
Okay. Oh, wow. And how long had he been missing?
A year. 1 year.
Wow. Oh my God. Yeah, he's completely, creepers, if you want to look. If you don't. But, he's completely, it's just bones.
Fully skeletal, him and the dog.
Yeah. Wow.
This was a shocking discovery, right? Because the year before Tom had gone missing, there were all these extensive searches for Tom because, again, it's so close-knit there. Everybody kind of knows everybody. So when one of their own goes missing, people stop everything. Like businesses board up for the day because you have to go find your people. They never found him, which I thought was so strange. I was like, so how could they have searched? This isn't even an hour hike outside of Silver Plume. Mm-hmm. How could they have not found him the year prior during all those search efforts, right? Mm. Now, let me just describe a little bit of what was going on with the remains because this is the strange twist. Both of these bodies, once they examined the remains, the skeletal remains, they had gunshot wounds to the head And there were purchase records that showed that Tom himself had purchased a pistol just before he went missing. So it was a revelation that at face value, of course, this looks like a very clear suicide. And ultimately, that was what they were going to rule it. And although the town was horrified because this was entirely senseless and nobody could see Tom as the person who would, one, harm his dog, but then also harm himself. But according to the sourcing that I found, this was on Historic Mysteries, the strangeness of the discovery went very far beyond that nobody found these remains for a year. When the body was examined, they did a ballistic test on the bullet holes. They could not match the bullets that were used to kill the dog and kill Tom to the pistol that was found next to them.
Huh. So somebody came up and shot them, and maybe he did just have a gun on him.
Well, it's possible. Yeah, I mean, it's very possible, but it was ultimately closed and ruled as a suicide. And there can be I did look this up. I will give a caveat. There are a number of reasons why a ballistics test in a forensic sense can fail if there is excessive weathering on remains or a gun. Like it could lose some of the indicators that could prove like this bullet this bullet came from this gun and entered this person. However, with only a year of weathering, that is usually, from what I read, usually not the case. So this was very strange, very, very strange, which opened the door to people saying, is this some kind of a cover-up? Did Tom Young go out there? Did he have bad blood with somebody? Was he killed? And then somebody planted this or left his gun there to stage it as a suicide because there was no note found with Tom Young. There was no explanation. Nothing.
Well, the dog component too is very, very bizarre. Even just looking at the photo of the remains, it kind of looks like they like fell down next to each other.
Like the dog was like right next to him when he shot him.
Yeah.
It's people were shocked by that. They just couldn't imagine. They were like, even if Tom was at his lowest and he was going to take his life, they could not imagine he would do that to Gus, that he would do that to his dog.
Yeah, because I feel like most of the time people don't do that. Like, you just want to take your own life. You don't really like, I feel like usually there aren't people that are super close to you. Like, you don't want to take them as collateral too, especially I think dogs too are like a different story because there's such a sense of comfort for people.
I agree. I mean, we've definitely seen anomalies where people take out their families or their spouse. We've seen murder-suicide pacts. So it's not to say it's impossible, but I agree. Very unlikely. And at least from the anecdotal contributions from people who knew Tom, that did not seem like him at all. But again, this was a shocking reveal because up until this point, we've got Keith, who's been living in this town for like a year, or sorry, not a year at this point, a year after the disappearance. And he's been here for like 3 months. And this entire time, he's investigating and writing this novel as if it's a mystery disappearance, like he was taken. So to have the reveal that it was a suicide, and then 1 week later, Keith himself goes missing, that raised some eyebrows.
Of course.
It was bizarre.
Super bizarre. So
like I said, nonetheless, county police, they handled this exclusively. Like nobody else touched it. The state did not touch it. And they deemed it this is a direct quote, a simple suicide is what they wrote. And for context, of course, it did make local news. And that's where Keith heard about it in the local press in Silver Plume. Just initial thoughts on like that setup before we're actually going to talk about the week after, which is the 7th of August when Keith himself seems to vanish on that night.
I guess I'm just wondering if there's a possibility that like the remains could have been put there, or like it just seems so strange how quickly he went missing
that
right after
found
the
him.
body was just found, or remains were just found. It seems very calculated, or it could just be coincidence, but it seems very odd. Like that's such a short turnaround.
I agree. I mean, one could have informed the other, especially if Keith was going to disappear of his own volition, that maybe the news of Tom's suicide could have driven him to do something. That was my initial thought. My question to you, I was going to ask about Tom purchasing the pistol before his alleged suicide.
Yeah.
Because on paper, you're like, okay, well, he bought a gun specifically to do that. In the back of my mind, I was like, or did he buy a gun because he anticipated somebody was after him?
Right.
That was my thought.
That's sort of what I was thinking too. I don't know. Or even just, I did have that thought, but even just before that, I was like, is that so strange? Like living out somewhere super rural and isolated and like being a shop owner to like, I guess if he wasn't historically a gun owner, that might be odd, but it didn't even really strike me, to be perfectly honest, as like something super, super odd until, of course, we started talking about like the possibility of him taking his own life. But yeah, I mean, if he felt the need to protect himself.
Well, it's difficult. It's difficult to say. The only thing that throws it really, really out of whack for me with the suicide theory is that, one, we cannot prove that the bullets in the dog or the bullets in Tom himself came from that pistol that was found, his pistol. And again, he would be a statistical anomaly for not leaving a note.
Yeah. Do you know anything about like how people in the town knew Tom, like their interactions with him?
He was, from everything I read, he was a beloved figure, which is why people in town were kind of in an uproar about this and had a lot of questions because when you want to talk about local lore going on in Silver Plume and the Whispers, it's crazy.
Oh, I'm sure.
Crazy. The people's suspicions. People have, like, they don't trust the police. They don't trust like certain people in town. They think there's bad blood between business owners. There's a lot of, there's a lot of stuff going down, but they had their suspicions and they thought Tom was not the person who would ever do this. But again, appearances can be deceiving. I'll always toss that out, but it's rich anecdotal evidence to me to hear people locally who knew him for years to say, this just doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense that he wasn't found for a year. They're like, people searched that area like a year prior. They're like, there's no way that we could have missed him when his remains were still like somewhat intact, like when he still looked like a person.
Yeah. And I just feel like the whole added element of Keith and then something happening to him, something doesn't add up here. There's some through line that we're not seeing.
Well, that's the biggest mystery because, again, Keith has still never been found, which I'm going to get into all of that search and just how strange that was that he himself has not been located to this day. And I know it was the 80s. Like, I know sources can be limited, but they had all the things that you would want. They had canines, they had aerial searches, they had all the stuff. So there's a lot of questions. I'm going to keep pressing on, but there are a lot of questions about how all of this has unfolded. So let's fast forward to the 7th of August. This is the week after the discovery of Tom's remains on the 31st. This is 1988. And the official report that I found states that Keith was confirmed to be closing up his shop around 5 p.m. that evening at the antique store on Main Street. I'm going to contest that just a little bit, only because I saw multiple witness statements who said they physically saw him walking away, like from town, at 4:30. So I think he closed up a little earlier, but the official report says 5.
Okay.
Now, Keith had made mention to a number of folks around him at the time of closing and around town that night that he wanted to head out to the Pendleton Mountain while there was still some light for the evening. He was going to go hiking there. One of his stops along the way was actually a cafe that night that he stopped at, which was owned by Ted Parker, who was a friend of his and also confirmed that he had mentioned this before he left. So it definitely sounds corroborated, like Keith was going to go on a hike that evening. And for context on the Pendleton Mountain, it is located near Silver Plume, and it's technically a part of the Rocky Mountain Range. And I think I have some pictures if you're down on the maybe second or third page. And again, creepers, these will all be up on Reddit.
Beautiful.
And from what I read, because I was like, okay, how difficult is this hike? I need context for like what he's getting into on this night. It's considered moderately challenging because it has some steep terrain, but it's not something that you couldn't do if you weren't a pro. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you're going to get a workout, but you're also more than likely not going to fall to your death kind of hike. So rocky paths, steep inclines, there is some loose soil, but it's not usually considered dangerous to navigate from what I read.
And he seems like he was in good shape.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this wasn't like his first hike by any means in the Silver Plume area. Like he had been there for a minute. But on this particular night in 1988, the sun, I looked it up because I was like, if he's going out at like 4:30 or 5 on this hike,
I was just thinking that.
How much light does he have? The sun was setting at 8:09, which was good context for me because I was like, okay, so he knows he's got a good number of hours of light. Although, if he was going to do the hike in its totality, it's about a 6-hour hike. Like if he's sticking to the trail, it's a 6-hour hike. So maybe he planned to do all of it and just finish out in the dark, do some stargazing, or maybe he was going to like turn around at the halfway point. We don't know.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of a common thing for people that live out west. Like, I just know, like, my brother does that. Like, he'll, like, go on a hike after work or whatever, and, like, people have their little route that they do. Like, it's like taking a walk. So I'm sure it was gonna be, like, a quick hike. I'm sure he wasn't gonna do the whole thing.
Wait, Blake does this?
Yeah, he'll, like, sometimes, like, go out and he's, I mean, massive hiker, but, yeah.
When I lived near Griffith, that was my hike. That's what I
Yeah.
used to do.
Now that's a hike. Yeah.
I saw a coyote there once. That was scary. A coyote.
I have seen a coyote in real life. I have, but down in North Carolina, not out west.
It was a tiny little skinny one. It was fine. But I'll get us back on track. So after about 2 hours, so we're going to assume he left between 4:30 to 5, let's say. After 2 hours, nobody heard from Keith. He didn't return. And again, people had expected him to because he had set the stage by saying, I'm going out on a hike. I'll be back in a little bit. So clearly to me, that told me, and I could be wrong about this, but it told me that the expectation was that he was not going to do the 6-hour hike. He's like, I'm going to go for a walk for a couple of hours. I'll go up Pendleton. I'm going to come back. So I'll meet you for dinner or something around like 7, right?
Yeah.
What's pretty miraculous about this story, because we often see, especially at the local level with police, that there's like a little bit of a delay. There was no delay in action here, which was incredible. People jumped in instantly, which again makes it all the more strange that he was never found.
Mm-hmm.
I think because, like I said, the same thing with Tom Young, because it's such a small community and word kind of travels quick between locals, that once police got word that Keith had not come back and he was officially reported missing, I think that night, like on paper by 10 p.m., he was a missing person. Everybody was out that night. Flashlights, neighbors, cops, like everybody had everything with them to go and find Keith because they assumed he got hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
He fell or broke his ankle or something. Anything could have happened. They knew that he knew what he was doing out there. They just had concerns that maybe something was a little off because he didn't seem to be dressed appropriately for a hike, or at least not one of that magnitude, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But again,
like shoe wise, or
from what I read, yeah, like they said he was in clothes that could be considered like workout clothes, but he didn't have the proper shoes. Like he wasn't wearing hiking boots or sneakers or anything like that. So that's where they assumed, they're like, maybe he just got overconfident and maybe he really did slip or get hurt out there.
Yeah.
So everyone is on foot. They're tracing the same exact path up the mountain. They've got flashlights, they've got whistles. They're calling out to Keith in the woods all night long. And it should be noted that the mountain itself is not without wildlife. It is very possible that you could be out there, you could encounter a black bear. I read about mountain lions. You could even encounter some venomous snakes. But I do think the absence of a body, any footprints, any blood, or any remains would almost entirely rule that out. Any kind of animal attack, I don't believe that's what happened.
Yeah.
By the next morning, there is an even more aggressive search. There is a massive ground and aerial search that took place. It attracted hundreds of volunteers and tens of thousands of man-hours in looking for Keith. And ultimately, this is actually considered, which shocked me, one of the largest search efforts in Colorado's history at the time. There were 125 officials who were searching for him at one time with 12 trained canines on foot, none of which could pick up a scent.
Whoa.
That's weird as hell.
That is super weird. Also, I just want to like note that I feel like with the Martin case, it was the exact same thing. So I don't know if it's like there's just more of a sense of like community out west, like in those kind of rural pockets or like mountainous pockets where people are like, no, it's serious business. Like when somebody goes missing, like who wants to be left alone? So I just wanted to like call that out. I think that's really like, maybe it's a special thing regionally, but just everybody kind of gets on it faster, I feel like, out there.
I agree. I also think it's seasonal dependent as well. You definitely get a lot of people who are ready to like jump out in the summer, who are going to go on foot all night and look. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's the whole thing of, I think, called off like so much of, like I'm thinking of the Yuba County 5 where they called it off because of bad weather early. Mm-hmm. And then I'm also thinking of Riker Webb where there was a thunderstorm. The day he went missing, a toddler, and some of them called off the search. And I'm like, no, that's the reason that you pick up the search when it starts raining and there's a 3-year-old on foot. I need to be running departments.
Yes, you do, baby. With that mug in hand. With that bowl with the handle in hand.
I'm going to keep getting bigger and bigger mugs. And I'm not going to mention it on the show. I'm not going to mention it.
A whole pot of
That's basically what I consume already. I might as well put it in just one vessel. So, like I said, 125 different officials, 12 different canines that could not pick up a scent on this guy. There is zero trace of Keith that is ever found in those woods. Not a footprint, no clothing, nothing. The official search for him, I believe, was called off exactly 1 week later on August 14th, 1988, after yet another tragedy took place in the forest of Silver Plume. I think it was on the final day of the search where there was a small plane, which again was out there to search for Keith, and it mysteriously crashed into one of the mountains. This was the pilot was killed instantly, and this was a very well-trained pilot, so it just seemed a little bizarre. But again, this started to spark a bit of like the hysteria and the rumor in town that there's something bad about Silver Plume.
Mm-hmm.
There's some kind of dark, ominous energy connected with this place where bad things happen to people there. But again, that happens in a small town where people just start to whisper. But at this point, we've got 3 very tragic events in one area in technically less than a year. That's unnerving for anybody. If you've got an alleged suicide, a mysterious disappearance, and now a tragic accident of a plane crash in Silver Plume, people were whispering. And that's
all connected.
Well, yeah, totally. There's like one through line, and I guess it all comes back technically to Tom Young. But I think this was really when like the rumor mills picked up in Silver Plume, if I had to guess. Like when people started to piece together the connections of the story and like, why was Keith in town? He was a writer, wasn't he? Like, oh, he was writing a book about Tom Young. And then Tom Young is found on the 31st. And then a week later, Keith mysteriously goes missing. So a lot of people started to point out like the strangeness of that and maybe some of the information that Keith was holding on to, because Keith was there properly to investigate the story. Like, what do people know about what Tom Young was involved with? Like, could it have been that somebody was after him? So that's the big question of what did Keith maybe know that he was going to include in the book just before he went missing? Let's just pause there and discuss some of the theories, because this is really where the case kind of sits. I mean, we're almost 40 years after the fact, and there's really no new information about what went down on that night. But I do have theories to share with you. So just initial thoughts on the story.
I mean, what a fascinating kind of web of like how it's all interconnected. I guess what I was just thinking was the finger pointing that I imagined started happening when you're in such a small town. Because it's like, okay, there's 200 of us here. What do you know that I don't know? And what does he know that he doesn't know?
Totally.
And like that all gets like spun up into chaos, I feel like, in small towns. So I'm very curious.
It's witch trials. That's literally what it is. It's a witch hunt. Like,
yes. So I'm very curious, like the validity of the theories that we're going to go into, or like how you're feeling some of them hold up, or if some of them are like small town.
Like it's local lore that's like born out of hysteria. I mean, we can discuss it for sure, but I really wrestle with this case where I'm like, I don't know. Like what, I would need some kind of reveal of like some insider information about somebody who knew something about Tom, because I think that's where it's all rooted. It's all rooted in something that nefarious that was going on with Tom, because then the reason for Keith's disappearance or possible murder or abduction would be to kill the witness, kill somebody who knows incriminating information about what really happened to Tom. And there's lots of theories in town that the police are involved, and that's why they ruled it a simple suicide so quickly. It's interesting. It's a very strange case. I mean, the first theory that we can talk about, since we usually jump into this first, is kind of the Occam's razor approach. Is it purely accidental, right? So Keith goes out on a hike, just quite simply just underestimated what he was getting into, and he could have, fallen to the elements. He may have suffered a fall on the hike up in the Pendleton Mountain, which would explain maybe to some degree if he experienced a very far fall and fell into a cavern or something, that maybe he was never found. But the strangeness that kind of disrupts that, of course, is that, again, no body, but also no scent in the woods.
Yeah. And there's so many people, like I was kind of saying earlier, that's just their recreation. They'll go on hikes, after work or in the morning before work. I think it's really bizarre, too, that nobody ever found him, like shortly after that. Just from foot traffic.
It's the speed of the search that night, where I'm like, technically, I mean, that would be your highest. You would have had the highest chance of finding something because of how quickly you moved. It was hours before people were out there with flashlights. Hours.
Yeah. Unless somebody, I guess, had like abducted him and was...
Well, that's the other theory, is that there's foul play to contest with here. But I will just, before we get off the accidental sort of Occam's razor approach, I will just mention something that I found here from Keith's own daughter. She would allegedly later confirm that her dad often liked to live out the experiences of the subjects he was writing about. So I get that kind of opened the conversation, at least online from what I read, that if Tom was the focal point and this was Keith's attempt following the discovery of Tom to recreate the foot traffic that Tom was on the night that he went out there and allegedly took his life, could it have been that Keith was attempting to do the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
It's possible.
It's definitely possible. And could there be a layer where whoever this is that like didn't want Keith in town has started to pick up on the fact that he's like getting so close to the story and getting like he's following every little trace that like Tom, the same exact path. And like, did this person know Tom's original path and was like, well, this will be easy. I'll just follow this guy and stick to
Or it could have been that he was followed all night. I mean, especially if he was
Yeah.
going around town that evening, kind of like sharing with people in public spaces.
Yes.
Like, oh, I'm going to go out on a hike tonight before dinner. I'll come back into town in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
That's a window.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody overhears that. That's a window.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, I mean, with that, we can probably shift into foul play because it seems like that's a little bit of where you're leaning so far. Am I correct in that? Or are you still kind of undecided and open?
I mean, it definitely just feels like it's so coincidental, or there's too many coincidences that it feels like something more nefarious is at play. It feels like somebody doesn't want him here. And it feels like Keith, unfortunately, was just like the gnat, like the pest that was getting in the way of something that felt like a perfect murder or cover up with Tom.
There's a quote from a movie that reminds me of that. It's I'm forgetting what it is, but it's kind of like, like don't go looking for answers that you don't want to. Find out. Like
exactly.
that's kind of the thing. It's the sentiment of it.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Why did this person want to get rid of Tom?
That's the big question. Okay, that was what I was really interested in. And I was like scouring online. I'm like, I need locals. I need locals to tell me like what the rumors are. I mean, even if I don't want to, perpetuate something, so I'll always give the caveat to be like, this is just a rumor.
Mm-hmm.
But you need some window into at least what the whispers are to see if there's, I don't know, some validity towards like a kernel of the truth within that. Because if we're not going to concede to the idea that Tom really took his life and we've got some mysterious things to contest with no note, and we have mismatched bullets in the dog and Tom's head, there are questions that we should ask.
Mm-hmm.
So let's shift into foul play as a theory, at least surrounding Keith. We'll start with Keith first and his disappearance. Many believe that he was the target of violence, and potentially this was connected to his investigation of Tom Young's mysterious death, of course. Some believe that Keith's curiosity and attempts to dig deeper into the circumstances at a local level into Tom Young's case could have led to very dangerous consequences here, especially if he had uncovered information that threatened individuals who may have been involved. What we do know is that him going up to the mountain that night was not a secret, of course. There were many people in town that he had kind of publicly declared this to that evening, which set the stage and gave a window for something like this to happen. There were also a lot of people who referenced the unfinished manuscript that Keith had, which allegedly used to be online. Somebody had published it, which it was only a couple of like chapters, but then it was removed. And I don't know who had it removed. I'm going to guess his family, maybe. But people were really scouring in that to see like, okay, because if he's writing about the experience of Tom Young, could he have been hinting that he was about to like start a new chapter into some sinister information or lore at the local level?
Mm-hmm.
But
or like write about somebody he interacted with that
that's
knew
what I'm
something.
Saying.
Yeah,
I'm sure he was going around town asking questions.
Oh,
I'm
for
sure he
sure.
was interviewing people.
Yeah,
I want to see if I have anything in here of like what people saw in that manuscript, because there was something like a strange quote. Let's see, chapters apparently within happened to Tom Young, not what he did, but what happened to him. Oh yeah. Most of what he had written, I guess, was phrased in like what happened to Tom Young, never about what he did. So he had never taken the approach. And of course, this could have been written well before the discovery of Tom Young and the ruling of suicide. But if the manuscript that was online was real, I believe he said something to the effect in there. I don't have it in my notes, but I remember reading about this. It was something that he uncovered about Tom Young. It will come to me.
Was Tom married?
Tom?
Yeah.
No, Tom was single.
He was single. Okay.
Or he might have been a widower, but at this time he did not have a partner.
But not like a lot of connections. Like he could go missing and have it not be.
Yeah, I don't actually even know if he had children. From everything I read, it was just him and Gus, him and the dog. Yeah. Because I did check all the missing person reports to see, like, what did they originally say about his description, but yeah, very strange. But it's killing me now because I thought I had it in my notes, but I remembered reading, and I'll toss it out that it is just a rumor, but it was something that Keith had written. Okay, now I'm remembering it. It was something that Keith had written where he was alluding to that he had just discovered some information about Tom. Or he was, this is what he said. He said, I now understand what Tom was going through, or something like that, which people put in two different camps. They were like, okay, he's aligning with him because he's having a midlife crisis. And now that Tom's been discovered as a suicide victim, Keith might have fallen into the same path, right?
Got it.
Or it could have been the totally opposite direction where Tom was being intimidated locally by people who were out to kill him. Maybe the same thing was happening to Keith.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, but no matter which way it goes, a very loaded kind of statement, if that's true. It means something.
Absolutely. It's not for nothing. So I guess, we could, since we mentioned the possibility that, Keith had taken his own life, we should discuss that as a theory as well. Is it possible the news of Tom's suicide, if it was real, informed Keith's state of mind, given that he was going through his own personal crisis, and then Keith went out there to follow in the footsteps and take his own life in a similar way?
Yeah, I don't throw that out. I think it's a pretty huge jump at 49 years old to say to your wife, I'm going to go out to the middle of nowhere in Colorado from sounds like a nice cushy job at the Herald in, a suburban area outside of Chicago. I'm sure
was 50 retirement age back then? When did people retire? Like 55?
Yeah. It would have been, I guess, kind of early, but yeah, you could have retired at 55 or 50. But I don't know. I feel like as a writer, he probably, I don't know. I was gonna say, because I feel like as a writer, and it sounded like he loved like the high school sports element, that he probably liked working, but maybe also as a writer, he was like, I have more to do. I have like more to uncover outside of sports.
Yeah, he was
writing.
Like, I am unfulfilled in the full breadth of my talents, I think was what he thought. I do want to toss this out. I don't know if this plays into any of the suicide theory, but this offers a different color to what could have gone down here, potentially that he left of his own volition. I'm going to preface by saying this is hearsay, but this is part of the local lore that I did read. So just cautioning before I'm going to discuss it. It is not confirmed, but in the days to weeks, allegedly, leading up to his disappearance, there were locals who remembered that Keith was bringing up on several different occasions that he was very interested in going to visit West Virginia. He kept talking about West Virginia. And allegedly, he was also seen at a get-together in town, kind of like a local party among friends. This was like days before he had vanished, where he spoke extensively to a woman that he had met that night who was visiting from out of town. She was from Denver. They believed her name. Nobody, I guess, really knew her or looked too deep into it to see who she was connected to at the party, but they believe, people who overheard this, that her name was maybe Gretchen or possibly Greta. Police could not confirm this. They did not track this person down. They did not look into it. But some people were suggesting, okay, if he was really experiencing a midlife crisis and then the news of Tom Young's suicide exacerbated all of those feelings, and he was looking for a way out or a way to run, and he felt overwhelmed by the sadness in Silver Plume, could he have linked up with this woman or this idea of West Virginia? Not to say the two are connected, but not to say that they're disconnected, and maybe that was the next place he was going.
Huh. And he just wasn't going to tell anybody that he was leaving town. He's leaving a store behind.
I have one more thing to add about this, actually.
Okay.
I forgot about this in my notes. Wait, this will inform more of this.
Okay.
I will not mention who this was. I'm going to keep this anonymous because I did do some like real local digging on this. I'm going to keep this source anonymous, but this is somebody who allegedly worked very closely with Keith during his career. This is back in the Chicago area. And they personally said that Keith was going through a crisis about turning 50, and that they believe from what he told them that he was ready to walk away from his life and start over somewhere. Whether that was him meaning the leave from Illinois to go to Colorado and like live out in the wilderness in Silver Plume, or that was a very long con where he was eventually going to walk away from everything, including his wife of 3 years. Difficult to say. But if that's true, what this source is saying, this is a legitimate way forward where we could at least say it's very possible that Steve could have left of his own volition. It's just strange and maybe unlikely that nobody would have seen him leaving town in a car. But maybe that's a part of the plan.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, or like, could he have gone out into the woods to meet up with this person that he was going to run away with? I mean, it's
How many connects for this do you find in Silver Plume? Like, what is that about?
Yeah. I do think we can't like shy away from the fact that he was really going through something. I mean, he obviously, to go and abandon your life that's established at 50 or 49, like something wasn't completely.
You're discontent.
We're off kilter. Yeah.
You're very discontent with where you're at, and you want.
Yeah.
You're searching for something.
And then to that effect, it's like he gets out to Silver Plume, and perhaps he's like realizing that it's all kind of for naught. Like he's like, all right, this story isn't really going anywhere. Yeah. The guy was just found. He actually just killed himself. It wasn't even a disappearance. What am I doing out here?
Right. Like that was the inciting incident where he was like, forget all of this. Forget any of my plans, that this was going to be a novel, that I was going to have Carolyn move out here with me in like a year and run this stupid antique shop. Like, I think that maybe I can see a scenario. I can feel a scenario where he was just so done with all of it. And that might have been the inciting incident where he was already kind of thinking about vanishing off somewhere.
Yeah. Cause then it's like, it's already kind of shameful, I think, for a lot of like men to kind of make a pivot like that and abandon, you know, their wife back home and whatever, and say, I'm going to do this big grand thing. Look at me go. And then for it to kind of not go the direction he planned, he might have been like, well, I can't go back to, how am I going to face my family? And, you know, which is really sad. But
it's a good point, though. We do see that with a lot of men where like business endeavors, and this is a business endeavor in his mind, where things just don't work out. They fail and people fall apart under the pressure from shame. Mm-hmm. I can see a scenario like that. It just adds to it definitely gives credibility to some of the mystery around why his scent was never found in those woods.
So weird. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just crazy for me to imagine somebody who could orchestrate this and leave really no paper trail of doing so in 1988, but also leave quite literally everything behind. All personal items, like quite a bit of cash behind, like your luggage, your car. Like, how the hell did he get out of town? Where did he go? How did he make money? Like, I have so many follow-up questions about it. But if I could kind of close this out, like I said, it has been close to 40 years. Or actually, are we over 40 years? This was 88.
Almost. Wait.
I'm not going to attempt to do the math. I think we're close to 40 years.
Years.
We're close to 40 years past this. And there is still a very ominous air over it, especially over Silver Plume as a place that, again, many people to this day believe is plagued by something. Whether or not, you know, people had been killed or there was foul play involved is up for debate. But I think people believe that there is some kind of a dark energy with this place that just drives people into a state of madness, is what they say. But I wanted to resurrect the Disappearance, one, because it's strange, but also it's twofold. It's the strangeness of Keith's disappearance in and of itself, but it's also unpacking a bit of the forgotten mystery of Tom Young and what that was about.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what this is reminding me of movie-wise or book-wise. Because I've definitely seen a scenario like this before where it's like the ghost of someone from the past is sort of like informing somebody else's future, and like you like feeling too much of a connection to that person that it like drives you into sort of a maddening
I
state.
I know what you're talking about too. What am I
I'm like,
thinking of?
what? Where have I seen this in other?
Oh my God. Wait, I know it. What is it? Is it Pet Sematary? Yeah. Hold on. First of all, there's only 12 stories in existence, and they're all rooted back to, I believe, Greek mythology, and they just get reinformed with different names.
I
But
mean,
in
honestly,
Pet
I'm
Sematary,
sorry.
in Pet Sematary, there is that he's a father, and he moves his whole family to a new town. But there is a ghost of like a guy who is killed under strange circumstances. I remember this, who's like continuing to show up and plague him and warn him, but it's simultaneously like driving him into madness because he doesn't know if what he's seeing is real or it's in his head.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's a Stephen King thing, because I was thinking, isn't that kind of like The Shining too? Where like Jack Nicholson's character.
This is definitely
at
an
the end,
archetype
he
of the
is
story.
him.
It's Hamlet. Like it's literally like a visitation from a ghost that drives you into madness.
That drives you into.
Yeah, there's a core to that story. I wonder what would have happened if Keith had ever finished the book about Tom. I do wonder if there would have been some like shocking reveals in there, or if there was at least some kind of rumor that he was perpetuating, or where he thought the story was going, or if he thought the story was truly over. I don't know. I wish we could get our hands on that manuscript to just have more of a window into like what his real connection. I looked everywhere. Yeah. And again, it was only a couple of chapters, so I don't know how much information we could really glean from it, but I did remember that people wrote who saw it. And again, this is a huge allegedly, but they were like, he definitely wrote about how he now understood what happened to Tom.
Mm-hmm. That's so strange and eerie.
Maybe that is all I've got for you.
Oh,
what today is today? Wednesday?
Case. Yeah, Wednesday, baby. Yeah, that is really, really. I'm sure also what haunts people about it is there's people that are that age in that town. Like men get to a certain age, and like that's kind of a curse, story in that town, that like what could happen to you when you get to your middle age, and the shop itself is still there. I'm sure it's very creepy. It's very eerie.
I know I've been asking for this a lot lately with some of the creepers who are mental health professionals or psychologists, psychiatrists who listen to the show, just to ask a little bit about if they could shed any light on what really goes on with the midlife crisis for a lot of people, specifically for men, because I'm interested to hear about like what sort of thoughts or ideations that bruise in men that they see case to case. Maybe that can help color a little bit of the story of what was really going on with Keith and how he was feeling, because so much of this exists in the solitude of him just existing in that town.
Yes. And I was also just thinking, speaking of solitude, this isn't like he was out in such an isolated area, like just environmentally, but also isolated population wise. Like nobody was out there. Like, and those small towns, it's hard to break in. It's hard to find friends.
I guess, I mean, it definitely, I agree with you for sure, but it seemed like he did find some folks. I mean, there were definitely some, I think just naturally, just from having to like patron the businesses of people around you, you definitely start to know some of the other local business owners. Mm-hmm. But again, maybe that's where the bad blood comes from.
Well, that's what I was thinking too. I'm like, did somebody just really not want him there from a business standpoint? Like,
which is crazy, because I'm like, same thing with Tom Young. I'm like, was it all just rooted in money or like business? And I was like, how profitable could a bookstore be? How profitable is an antique shop?
Yeah.
In Silver Plume. Like, what are we?
Yeah.
I mean, it could be, I cannot concede to this being like the mob or anything like that. Because like, I know the way that things work or have worked for a long time out in like Long Island, like Jersey. And I know from like the Italian whispers in my family, like a lot of mob work is the mob coming into local businesses and kind of shaking you down for rent, even though you're paying rent to a business, but you've got to pay for the protection of the mob, right? Or to be in their good graces. Like, you got to pay a due, kind of. And I was like, could that have been going down in Silver Plume? It doesn't seem likely, but I guess anything is possible. It's got old lore to it. It's an old-ass mining town, so who knows? Well,
somebody definitely didn't want him to find out something about Tom, that's for sure. And I wonder what lived in that shop.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. If Tom left something behind in the shop.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a reason that he chose to be in that shop. Like, he was looking for something, whether it was a feeling to try to get a sense of like, so interesting what his daughter said about the idea of him wanting to live through the experiences of his subjects. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a fiction writer. So I was like, well, maybe that's just like, if he's writing about young up and coming athletes predominantly, like he gets a high from like kind of vicariously like seeing their experience, their
like
come
going
up.
to the games. And
Yeah. And that's what she meant by like he liked to live through his subjects. I don't know if that necessarily translates to him writing, I guess this wasn't fiction, but writing, it was halfway between the point of fiction and truth. Tom Young was the inspiration, but he was going to take fictional liberties, creative liberties with his novel, which also throws the manuscript into whack because we're like, well, can we trust any of what was written, or is he like creating a story?
Well, also it could have just been like he came to town and people were like, or whoever this was, maybe that was out to get him, was like, this tragedy that happened in our town is not like fodder for your book. Like, who are you, city guy, coming here to like write a book? I mean, I don't know, but
no, that's a trope that we see in movies too, where like the writer, the big flashy writer from the city comes to town and the locals are like, who the hell do you think you are coming to these parts to like rip up our local pain and turn it into profit?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I have truly no idea which direction this could go. And it is a proper disappearance. Like, we have nothing to go off of. Nothing.
Have they ever made a movie about this or anything?
You know what? They have made something. I don't know if it was a movie, a reenactment, or a documentary, but it's called something like Dark Mountain or something like that. And it follows Keith going through town, like resurrecting the story of Tom. And again, I don't know how fictional that is or like which liberties they took. Hold on, my leg fell asleep.
So did I. I just switched my foot just fell asleep.
Oh my God.
Not on the side, baby.
Look at my tattoo.
Oh, show her off.
But that's what I've got for you, baby.
That was so interesting. Wow. That was, I'm like, now I want to go to Silver Plume when we're out there.
Again, yeah. I was like, I'm going to stay far away from that place, but thank you.
Yeah,
it's 70 miles outside of Colorado. So how long would that be driving wise?
Outside of Denver.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry.
70 miles, like an hour if we're speeding.
To the Rockies, 4 miles per hour.
Yeah.
4 miles per hour, tops. No way.
Pedal to the freaking metal, baby.
I don't know. I wonder if there are some towns like that do not take kindly to tourists.
I know. I was kind of thinking that though. Like, if this is something that's really plagued their town, then maybe we shouldn't go there
or at least not vocalize that you're here to like learn more, like to like ask stories about like the Keith Reinhard disappearance or Tom Young's disappearance. I don't know. I'm curious what it's like today. And I'm also curious, do you see that bookshop? I have a picture of the bookshop in the pictures.
Yeah. I was zooming in on it. It had like a big KP at the top. I was wondering what that was. KP. I didn't know if that was like somebody's initials or I don't know if you saw that, but it struck me as odd. I was like, oh, was there somebody that owned this whole area? It was KP.
I mean, he's renting from somebody.
Yeah.
He's renting the shop from somebody. So I wanted to look into that to see like, is it the person who owns the building who's got some like nefarious intent or something like that? There's a million different ways it could go. But again, people have also attributed a lot of this to being like, the reason there's no headway on this or people have kind of closed the book is because police are involved. I have nothing to corroborate that, but like, that's a big sentiment. They're like, everybody knows how many cops are in Silver Plume and how many people are like best friends
related
with those cops. Or cousins or something.
Not cousins. Cousins with a Z.
Cousin story.
That's in my group chat with my cousins. We're called cousins.
Cuz. Baby, that is all I've got for you on this day.
Thank you. That was really interesting. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you. I was interested to get into it, honestly. I got kind of wrapped up in the research while I was doing it, and I spent a lot of time digging into the story because it's one that I never want to say a story has to be fueled by rumor, but I'm interested to hear what the locals have to say, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if, on the other hand, like locals to that area, if it is something that you don't touch with a 10-foot pole, like you should also tell us because I would be kind of curious about that.
Do you think we don't have Silver Plume listeners?
Or people that are around that area, maybe.
It's possible. Creepers. I mean, if there's anybody who knows Silver Plume has been there, I would love to hear this. Please check on Reddit and drop some information so we can share it on the next episode.
Yes, please do.
Oh, wait. Before we leave, I had one more thing to do. I mentioned this in the upfront, so hopefully you're still listening if you're still listening to the show. But we are so excited about the upcoming tour dates that we wanted to do something a little special, and we were going to select 5 random names from each city to kind of like week over week just shout out on the podcast as a thank you for getting early tickets to the show. So I'm not going to say the full name to protect it in case it is a surprise, but thank you so much to Katie W, who is coming to the Los Angeles show, Sandra A, who is coming, Tatiana P, who is heading out, Diana G, who I think was possibly at Vegas. I'm not sure, but that name looks familiar. And then Kelsey F. Thank you to you 5. We are going to continue to do this 5 random names. Shout outs on CreepTime, the podcast with Stu and I as a thank you again for getting your tickets on creeptime.com to come see CreepTime live.
Oh, we cannot wait to see you guys, especially those that are coming back to see us that came to Vegas.
Oh my God.
Babies, you're in for a treat.
I'm excited to see if I recognize any faces too. I think
me too.
Kendra is definitely coming to the Los Angeles show. That I know.
Oh God, baby. I'm so excited.
And I will spot her. I will find her in that crowd.
Kendra vision.
But babies, that is all we have got for now. Thank you again for tuning in and for listening. For now, we are going to say goodbye.
And good luck, y'all.
Catch you later, creepers. See you next week.
Bye, guys.